Today we're talking about the Battle of Bunker Hill, the first official planned battle of the American Revolution. It's the summer of 1775. Let's get to it. All right, June 17th, 1775 to be precise. The Battle of Lexington and Concord had happened in April 1775, and since that moment in time, since the first shots of the American Revolution, the American colonial militias have surrounded the British in Boston. It's essentially a city under siege. The British redcoats are outnumbered by over 6 times as many soldiers. That's how many more soldiers the Americans have than the British redcoats, who are trying to hold this city. And so the redcoats, the British, they get this idea to expand out of the city and take this hill, Bunker Hill, the high ground on the northwest side outside of downtown Boston. So they plan this. They have this battle plan. It's called the Battle at Bunker Hill. And it will forever be known as the Battle of Bunker Hill, but that title is not exactly accurate. And every time I teach this, I tell my students, so does anybody know where the Battle of Bunker Hill was? Where did it occur? And of course the hands go up and they say, Bunker Hill. And I have to say, no, incorrect. And they're stunned. But it's true. This battle would actually happen on a nearby hill called Breed's Hill, which was one step closer to the city of Boston, where the British were, than Bunker Hill. So let's take a look at this map here. As you can see, downtown Boston is over here. Across the Charles River is Breed's Hill and Bunker Hill. So that original attack plan called for the focus to be on Bunker Hill, but the Americans got word of that, and they transferred their soldiers under the cover of darkness, most of their soldiers, not all, but the large majority of their men, one step closer over here to Breed's Hill, so that the British would be surprised when the sun rose that morning of the battle that that's where most of the American militiamen were. And this battle is really unique in American history because it's almost like battle for theater, you know, an uneasy theater, because that early morning of that battle in June of 1775, people in the city of Boston and the surrounding small towns, they awoke to cannon fire. There's a great scene in the HBO miniseries John Adams in episode 2 where Abigail Adams and their young children, they hear the cannons going off, and they go out into their backyard and they look out at Boston Harbor and they can see the cannons going off and the fire and then battle happening at Bunker Hill. And that was the reality for people. People watched this battle on their rooftops. And I said uneasy theater because many of them knew people who were involved in this battle, and they didn't know if they were going to make it. It was extremely scary, but it was a battle with an audience, which you don't usually think of warfare as being like that. You know, there would be a battle much later in the American Civil War called the First Battle of Bull Run that was kind of like that, where people actually traveled to watch the battle. Maybe I'll talk about that here on the channel another time. This time, they didn't plan on it, but they heard it, and they went out, and they could see the battle unfolding. So, yes, I mean, they're firing from their boats, cannons, and then eventually they want to make the charge up Breed's Hill to capture the hill from the Americans. The British do. This depiction of the battle shows the death of American General Joseph Warren, who was a good family friend of John Adams and his family. He died in this battle. He was John Adams' physician, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And here's a really famous drawing, painting, depiction of the Battle of Bunker Hill. And this depicts the charge up the hill. And this is one of the reasons why this battle is so legendary, because of the Redcoats charging up the hill and how many charges it took for them to finally take the hill. So how it all played out was the British, you know, their lines, they make their way up the hill, and the Americans just unleash firepower on them, and the British have to retreat. And the British come up a second time, and the Americans unleash fire, and the British have to retreat. And finally, on the third advancement up the hill, the British take the hill. So technically the British win this battle. They take the high ground. They take the position. But the Americans feel as though they won the battle because they inflicted way more damage on the British than the British did to them. In fact, the only reason the Americans surrendered the hill and retreated was because they ran out of ammunition, because they fired at the British so much. And they did a lot of damage to the British military. We'll look at the numbers here in just a second. Now, there's a legend about this battle where the commanders supposedly told their American militiamen to not fire until they see the whites of the Britishmen's eyes. Do not fire until you see the whites of their eyes. Was that actually said? We don't know for sure. Probably not. It's probably just an urban legend. But that's one of those stories you'll hear about Bunker Hill. And I always say that because I love this cartoon from back in the mid-90s. Bunker Hill, June 17th, 1775. An unfortunate twist of fate for one young redcoat, Charles Bug-eyed Bingham, was not knowing that the opposing American general had just uttered the historic command, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes." Poor Charles Bug-eyed Bingham, he was the first to go. So anyways, yes, it was a British victory, but American confidence grew. Again, yeah, they didn't technically win the battle, but they kind of felt like they won. They only retreated because they ran out of ammunition, and they did way more damage to this army that was supposedly the best army in the world. It cost the British dearly. 40% of all of the British deployed troops in Boston were killed or wounded in this battle. 40% in one battle. I mean, that's incredible. So that was a high price to pay for, this high ground on Bunker and Breed's Hill, where the British were, thinking they could expand out of the city once more and control the countryside. Doesn't turn out that way. Low reward. Gaining control of these hills didn't end up meaning much. By March of 1776, the British are going to be evacuating Boston and ceding control to George Washington's new Continental Army. So that's how it all played out in brief form. That's your summary of the Battle of Bunker Hill, the first planned assault in the American Revolution. Technically a British victory, but for all intents and purposes, the Americans kind of won this battle. Probably made them a little too confident, to be honest with you, because the following year of 1776 wouldn't go as smoothly as 1775 did, where we saw the Americans win at Lexington and Concord, and then here, just 2 months later, inflict all kinds of damage on the British at Bunker Hill. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit thumbs up. I would really appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel while you're here as well. That would also help me out a lot. Look for more great content here on the channel, and we'll see you all next time.